Hello, welcome to Macroeconomics class. And today we'll be discussing on fiscal policy and government budget. And as we go through this module, we will try to look into how governments use revenue and expenditure to influence the economy, thereby promote stability and manage public debt. When we talk about fiscal policy, what do we mean by fiscal policy? Fiscal policy plays a central role in managing a nation's economic activity and achieving macroeconomic stability. And it refers to the use of government revenue collection, primarily through tax and expenditure to influence the economy. So it's the use of these two main concepts, government revenue and government expenditure, in order to influence the economy. And through fiscal policy, government attempts to smooth out economic fluctuations, promote growth, control inflation, reduce unemployment, and maintain sustainable public debt level. And a key concern of fiscal policy is the balance between the revenue and the spending, which is the expenditure, resulting in either a budget surplus, budget deficit, or a balanced budget. And the government budget is a detailed financial statement outlining expected revenue and planned expenditures, reflecting economic priorities and resource allocation. And this is just an introduction into the concept, and we'll further look into it. So government may deliberately run a deficit to stimulate economic activities during a downturn, or maintain a surplus to cool an overheated economy. Since we talk about government revenue and expenditure being a key instrument in influencing an economy, we need to look into what they really are. So as per government revenue, this comprises of all funds received to finance its activities, primarily really categorized into tax, non-tax revenue, and capital receipts. For tax revenue, these are major sources, and they are compulsory payment from individuals and businesses. And we can divide it into the direct tax and the indirect tax. For the direct taxes, they are those that are levied on income and wealth of individuals and complaints. So example is the income tax, corporate tax. And for the indirect tax, these are those that are imposed on goods and services. And you see it in example of value-added tax, the VAT, the excise duty, and some others as such. And for the non-tax revenue, these are the receipts not from taxes. And when we talk about this, profit from state-owned enterprises, they are profit from state-owned enterprises, and also fee for public services. They derive it from fee that are collected from public services like passport fee. Also, their interest or dividend on government investments, and also their grants or aids from foreign entities. These are non-tax revenue. And for capital receipts, they are funds raised through non-revenue means. And they are borrowings, whether domestic or foreign, sales of government assets in terms of privatization, and also the recovery of loan and advances. For the government revenue, it covers all spendings for public goods, services, and welfare, which is also divided into two: the recurrent spendings or expenditure, and the capital spendings or expenditure. So when we talk about the recurrent expenditure, we talk about the day-to-day operational spendings, and these encapsulates the salaries of public servants, infrastructure maintenance, the pension and social security, and interest payments on public demands and more. And as per the capital expenditure, these are investments in long-term assets such as construction of roads, schools, hospitals, and investment in technology and defense, and acquisition of land and buildings and more. So expenditure is also functionally classified into social, economic, general, and debt services. When we talk about budget in government, we can see it in terms of uh, surplus, deficit, and balanced budgets. And why do we need to look into it? It's very important because it's very key in in using it as a tool to influence government, I mean the economy. And the balance between government revenue and expenditure determines the budget outcome. And just like I said, the outcome can be in surplus, it can be in deficit, and can be a balanced one. So for budget surplus, this is when total government revenue exceed the total expenditure, and this can be used to pay off debt or investment. And to calculate this, we say budget surplus is equal to total revenue minus total expenditure. And for example, if there is 12 trillion naira revenue that came in, and the spending or expenditure was 10.5 trillion naira. So there will be a budget surplus. There will be a surplus of 1.5 trillion naira. And then for the budget deficits, this is when government expenditure exceed the revenue, requiring borrowing, and this can stimulate economic but risk rising debt. And to calculate this, it is total expenditure minus total revenue. And for this, for example, if there is 15 trillion naira expenditure and 12 trillion naira revenue, then the deficit should be 3 trillion naira. And for the balanced budget, this is when total revenue equals total expenditure, and this signals fiscal prudence but may limit response to economic downturn. And to calculate this, just like I said, its total revenue is equal to total expenditure. And ideal during stable growth, it's ideal during stable growth, but counter-cyclical policy often preferred in such. What are the types of budget deficits? We have three types of budget deficits. The first is the fiscal deficit, the second is the revenue deficit, and the third is the primary deficit. For fiscal deficit, it is the broadest and most comprehensive measure of government's financial shortfall, and it is the total expenditure minus total revenue excluding borrowings, and it reflects total borrowing requirements. And just mathematically, it is total expenditure minus the addition of revenue receipt plus non-debt capital receipts. For the revenue deficits, this is when revenue expenditure exceed revenue receipt, and it indicates borrowing for routine operation, fiscally unhealthy. And for okay, mathematically, it is revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. And primary deficit is the fiscal deficit excluding interest payment on previous debts. And it shows current fiscal stance without past debt burden. And to calculate this, it is fiscal deficit minus interest payments. Just like I have said, talking about fiscal policy as a tool, one of the major, one of the ways through which, one of the tools that is being used by the government is taxation. And in talking about this, I've said we have types of taxes, which is the direct and the indirect. Now, what is the economic impact of taxation as a fiscal policy tool? The first one is that it reduces disposable income and slows down demand. And also it influences investment decision in terms of for corporate taxes. Also, it redistributes income in terms of progressive taxation, and it discourages undesirable activities such as sin taxes. And during downturns, tax cuts stimulate demand, and during boom, tax increase cool the economy. As per government spending, we've talked about the types of it, when capital expenditure and recurrent expenditure. What is the economic effect of government spending as a fiscal policy tool? The first is that it stimulates aggregate demand, creating job. Also, it corrects market failures, uh, especially in public health, and also it enhances human capital in the place of education, health, and some other ones. And also it supports income and alleviates poverty. So in recession, increased spending, which is an expansionary policy, boosts growth, and in overheating economy, reduced spending, contraction, which is contractionary policy, prevents inflation. Also, we look into another concept, which is the public debt. And when we talk about public debt, it is the total money a government owes arising from financing budget, deficit or project. And what are the reasons for the debt? What are the reasons for um, having this debt? The first is for financing budget shortfall. Also, it's for funding public investment in terms of infrastructure. It also responds to crisis. It's being used to respond to crises such as pandemic and wars. And lastly, to stimulate economy during recession. And these are the reasons why the debt actually comes up. And for the economic impact, it is to stimulate growth if managed well. It stimulates growth if managed well. Also, it's useful for crowding out. That is, high borrowing can reduce private investment. Also, um, debt servicing burden, it's useful. It has an impact on debt servicing burden um, for future budgets, and also it may cause inflation if financed by primary money. And the last impact is that foreign debt exposed to exchange rate risk. So the foreign debt is exposes to foreign exchange rate risk. And responsible debt management involves sustainable debt to GDP ratio, the transparency policy, and efficient resource allocation. In conclusion, we've been able to look at the role of fiscal policy in influencing economy, whereby government uses taxation and spending to manage economic activity, promote growth, and ensure stability. We've also looked at budget outcome, where we talked about surpluses, deficits, or balanced budget, which reflect fiscal health, each with distinct macroeconomics implication. And we've also looked at public debt management, where we say while essential for development, debt requires prudent management to avoid long-term economic strain and ensure sustainability. Thank you.